You ever stop and think about what's actually in a single drop of water? Well, today we're diving into this incredible story. It's all about how we stumbled upon this invisible world that's literally everywhere, and how we even began to make sense of it all. I mean, it sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? But this isn't just some hypothetical what-if scenario. No, this is what kicked off a whole revolution. It pulled back the curtain on a hidden dimension of life that was, right there under our noses the whole time. So, you know how every great adventure story has its pioneer, its first explorer? Well, in our story, the pioneer wasn't charting unknown seas or climbing massive mountains. No. He was looking into a universe so tiny, nobody had even dreamed it was there. And get this, he wasn't some formally trained scientist in a fancy lab. He was a Dutch draper. Yeah, a cloth merchant. But he had this insatiable curiosity, and he got really, really good at grinding his own lenses. And what he saw through those tiny lenses, well, it was about to change everything. That man's name was Antony van Leeuwenhoek, and it's so fascinating to put his work into context. I mean, you've got these absolute giants, right? Darwin, Koch, Jenner. They all came up with brilliant theories about how this unseen world works. But Leeuwenhoek? He was the guy who kicked the door open in the first place. He was the very first person to actually lay eyes on bacteria and protozoa. He wasn't just proposing a new idea, he saw an entirely new world. Can you just imagine the sheer wonder he must have felt? There were no words like microbe or bacterium back then. He's just looking through his simple homemade microscopes and seeing these tiny little creatures swimming around in rainwater, even in the gunk from his own teeth. So he came up with the perfect name for them: animalcules. Literally, little animals. How cool is that?
Okay, so Leeuwenhoek's discovery was absolutely mind-blowing, but it immediately opened up a giant new can of worms. A huge question. If these little critters are everywhere, where in the world do they come from? And that question, oh boy, it kicked off one of the biggest scientific debates in history.
For centuries, pretty much everyone believed in this idea called spontaneous generation. The basic theory was that life could just poof, appear out of nowhere, like frogs came from mud, mice just showed up in piles of grain, and maggots were born from rotting meat. And based on what you could see with your own eyes, it kind of seemed to make sense. This belief was ancient. But this wasn't just some stuffy academic question. The implications were enormous. I mean, think about it. If these tiny, invisible animalcules can just pop into existence anywhere, how could you ever hope to control disease? How could you truly understand what life even is? This old idea just had to be challenged. And the person who stepped into the ring to challenge it was none other than the legendary French chemist Louis Pasteur. He was completely convinced that this whole spontaneous generation thing was wrong, and he designed an experiment that was so elegant, so definitive, that it would rewrite the textbooks for good.
Okay, so here's the genius of what he did. First, he took some nutrient broth, basically a soup for microbes, and boiled it, killing anything that might be living inside. The flask he used had this special S-shaped swan neck. Now this was the secret sauce. Air could still get in, but any microbes floating around in that air would get trapped in the bend. And the result? Nothing. The broth stayed perfectly clear. But then, and this is the mic drop moment, he tilted the flask just enough for the broth to touch that trapped dust. And bam! Almost immediately it became cloudy, just teeming with microbial life.
And there it was. The verdict was in. Life wasn't magic. It doesn't just appear from nothing, it comes from other pre-existing life. This one principle, omne vivum ex vivo, completely changed the game and laid the essential groundwork for the germ theory of disease and really all of modern biology. All right, so we found a secret universe, and we've proven it doesn't just come from thin air. But this creates a new challenge. Now we're facing this chaotic zoo of countless new life forms. How on earth do you even begin to organize it all? The answer lies in a field of science called taxonomy. You can think of it as the grand library of life. It's the official system that scientists came up with to bring order to all that chaos, giving every single organism a name and a place on the shelf based on what it's like and how it relates to everything else. And I love this analogy because it makes it so clear. It's like a mailing address for every living thing. Seriously, you start big with a country, then a state, a city, a street, all the way down to a single house number. Taxonomy does the exact same thing for every single living organism. This hierarchy works like a set of nesting dolls. It starts incredibly broad at the level of kingdom, like, is it an animal? Then it gets progressively more specific. You go down through phylum, class, order, family, genus, until finally you land on a single, unique species. Each step down that ladder brings you to a group with more and more in common.
And this is exactly why it's so crucial. It creates a universal language for biology. A scientist in Japan and a scientist in Brazil can be absolutely certain they are discussing the exact same organism. It makes global collaboration and sharing knowledge even possible.
So let's bring it all together. From Leeuwenhoek's little animalcules to Pasteur's brilliant experiment to the development of taxonomy, you see this incredible progression. First, we discovered an invisible world. Then, we proved it comes from existing life. And finally, we created a system to organize it. This journey, from discovery to explanation to organization, that's the very bedrock of modern microbiology.
And that leaves us with a final thought. We have created this incredible map of life, but we know that the microbial world is still a vast uncharted territory. So the question remains, what other animalcules, what other fundamental rules of life are still out there, just waiting in a single drop of water for the next explorer to find them?